Cool. And we're live. Over to you, buddy.
Hey guys, morning.
Morning.
So I want to bring up today is a question. I guess seems to be a lot of people probably have it come to mind, and I think it's used for marketing a lot lately, trying to people to sell their shift their wares. And what it is it ever truly possible to discover your life's purpose? I mean, it's not something I've ever really felt able to speak with many others about, but this group does feel pretty perfect for it. So the main things that tend to come to mind, I mean, and I think there's a lot of you may have experienced this. I'm sure many people have experienced this. You'll have brief times when you know for certain this is what I need to do. This is my life's purpose. This is what I'm here for. And there's times you have not got a Scooby-Doo at all. No idea. So really what I kind of get going today is find out what kind of methods others in here use to try able to actually discover this. Is it even realistic to actually discover a purpose? Is that even possible? Or is it possible to have one, or is multiple purposes okay to have? Also, does it seem or feel that there's like a constant need to have like a clear-cut purpose? Is this even necessary, for example? Couple of bits. Is it possible that there's even like one single overt purpose that's shared by all humans? Or are we simply confusing a life's purpose with like our survival instincts? Because do other animals have a life's purpose? I don't know. I can't communicate with them, or is it purely, or is that's just what we call, their natural instincts, things they do to survive? Is that purpose just to survive? So I know it's kind of a vomit of words right now, but that's kind of where I am. As I thought, best bunch of guys to put it to and get some input from. So yeah, I'm definitely kind of going to cut it there and just jump straight into it. See what you guys' thoughts are on that.
Cool. Yeah, I don't mind saying a few things, and obviously I'll leave the other guys say what they think. But it's kind of those things that I think humans try to put labels on because we try to understand the universe. So, life purpose or life path is kind of like just an easy label. And I think because we're multidimensional, we don't really understand all the parts of ourselves, and so we're always finding new bits, and then it always kind of changes that purpose or path. And it also gets very confusing because obviously a lot of things we thought we knew to be true, maybe we let that go later in life. We find new information or things we were told to be true by society is no longer true for us. So like that part of like holding on to an ideology or dogma about what is life's purpose or path can definitely limit you in trying to define it and hold on to something. So I think defining it is maybe not the most useful exercise, but definitely to like you said, what are some practical ways you can think about how are you aligned with that? Do you feel like your life is moving with flow, with meaning, with purpose? And if it's not, how do you kind of reassess that? So definitely being different stages of my life where I felt more in flow than others. Probably at the moment, like I'm in one of those good spaces where I feel like everything's kind of moving very nicely. I'm not even trying to get anywhere. So that probably is also part of it, is like when you think you need to get somewhere, that's probably a bit of an illusion or something. I think we're all kind of, we're all kind of remembering how to do more being instead of more doing. So I think we're kind of stuck in this doing thing. And then learning or unlearning that to just remember how to actually be, and then what guidance comes to you, what insight comes to you in those sort of states is very powerful, and that can then take you on the next part of your journey, and that can evolve many times. Like at the moment, I feel just really cool to spend time in nature and just bringing people out here where I'm in Portugal, just to experience what's possible. When you're just being and just not doing anything and just remembering, oh, this is my true nature, this is part of me. And when you really immerse yourself in this type of environment, it's quite powerful. So for me, this just feels like the right thing right now. Last year I was doing a lot of crypto because there was a lot of things coming up in crypto space, and I thought huge opportunity there. Let me jump in and see what's going on. And it's all different forms of energy. And I think that kind of for me is my sort of guiding purpose, is like trying to understand how energy flows in the universe. And maybe how to harness it, for my benefit, obviously, and also then share the information with other people to understand how energy flows in the universe. So it could be currency with things like cryptocurrency, blockchain. It could be literal energy like sunlight coming down, how you harness that in your body. And so for me, that's kind of my life purpose, is just understanding energy flows around me and the parts that I'm not maybe aware of myself. Like hidden parts come up as you get more and more immersed into nature and kind of maybe get more isolated from society. So again, that kind of comes in flows and phases. Like I might spend 6 months now in the country and then go back into the city for a few months, and then just see how that feels and just kind of see what comes up. But I'm not trying to really get anywhere other than making sure that day to day feels good. And obviously my energy levels feel good. I feel purpose in what I'm doing, what I'm sharing, because I share a lot on Facebook and stuff, and that's how people kind of find out about what I'm doing. People can come out here and they can experience that. So a few people have done that already, and that's been really fulfilling. So I feel like, yeah, there's just maybe different stages, but it's not so much about trying to find it or where you're trying to get to. But definitely, yeah, maybe Emil, he's got his hand up. I'll let him say something.
He's outside.
Sorry, I can't see the screen really. I tried to find the unmute button. Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting topic, and I can relate a lot to what Michael is saying about being and relaxing into a purpose that is unfolding almost automatically, because I've been living most of my life really trying to control every aspect, trying to control how much money I would have, trying to control my time. I think a lot of people are stuck in that, and they think, and they kind of mix discipline up with control and think, oh, I have a strong discipline, but they're actually trying to control the outcome. And then what I felt is that the more you try to control, the more you deviate from this natural higher path that the universe have already chosen for you, which you could probably call faith, or there are probably other words for it, but it feels like the more I push, the more I deviate from that path. I can go somewhere, I try to push somewhere, I feel like, oh, now I want to be a martial artist, for example, and I really push and push and push, and you can really feel intuitively that if you really listen to the body, that it's not the right path, but the mind really wants to control. Oh, I want to be able to do this and this and this, and then I push and push and push, but then after maybe 6 months or 1 year, I feel like, oh, this wasn't the right thing. I was pushing, the mind wanted to push somewhere, and it was deviating from the higher path that was already chosen for me. So what I found recently is the more I relax, the more I just let things be, then they kind of pop up automatically into this higher path, and it just feels right. So a little similar to what Michael is saying about being in nature definitely connects you into that special rhythm where everything is just perfect. I know I've mentioned this a lot, but also from really deep, long meditation retreats, it really feels like you don't need anything. So this whole idea about having a plan for life, a career, and reaching somewhere, getting to the goal, it just feels so obsolete when you're actually very, very present. Then you don't need anything. It feels like this is it. This is what it's supposed to be. There is no goal. There is no path. It's just being and exploring with as many senses as possible. So you actually feel the whole rhythm of the universe moving in through you and out through, and that can be enough. And then whatever comes from that kind of stems from a place of deep intuition and connection with nature. And I think in there probably is some kind of higher plan, but it's definitely possible to deviate from that higher state of being. And I think if you manage to stay in the middle path, as the Buddha would probably call it, then you will eventually reach somewhere. You don't know really where it is, but it just, as long as it feels right all the way, it seems like that's where you're supposed to end up. And where that is kind of limitless, because we're definitely here for a very long time if we want to, and we've also been here before, and we're definitely going to go somewhere else after. So whatever this thing is going to take us is very very, very limitless. So even speaking of it in terms of material things in this world and planet, is kind of limiting a little bit what there is, I think. So just some thoughts.
I mean, I know Mike touched on it as well regarding, like, and I think Emil as well, like, we need to find something. But I mean, I know you probably both kind of answered it, but I was trying to think, do you think it's even necessary to have a purpose to get things done, or is purpose too strong a word? Is that unnecessary? I mean, what's your thoughts on it? It's unnecessary to have what purpose it, just be, or do you think there are massive benefits to it as well for helping yourself reach, somewhere?
The way that I would frame it is along with what Michael and Emil were saying. I would frame it in the terms of knowing thyself, and this is through a lot of different readings and a lot of many people have said that, and also the multidimensional aspects of who we are. And so as we go through these phases of life of peeling off the layers and getting to know ourselves more, and understanding that we chose to be here, our higher selves chose to be here, sort of incarnating here on earth, and sort of there's many different layers to the depths of where we're coming from. So as we have a clear communication vessel with the full spectrum of who we are, and we gain understanding of who we are more, then we're able to tune in more to that knowing and that intuitive nature, that part that connects with us through nature, and be able to gain a greater understanding and perspective on who we are through a multidimensional space. And I think this is what the ancients were getting to as well, and Emil touched on it with the senses as well. Like, for example, in ancient Egypt, they have the netters. They're aspects of nature, and some people believe that those aspects of nature are also our senses, and that we have 360 senses. And so one of the wisdom keepers over there, Hakimoyan, would teach that because we live in a light-based reality, we have 360 senses. And so as we sort of begin to understand the greater aspects of our being, and that we chose to be here, and that we chose to incarnate here on this earth, and then we begin to understand that this journey has been through eons of time and millennia and lifetimes as well. And we understand things like we go beyond things like time and space, and understand that the past, present, and future is all happening simultaneously. These are all kinds of more layers to the purpose of who we are. Like, are we talking about like purpose in terms of, what am I supposed to do as my job for the rest of my life? Or are we talking about who am I as a human in this earthly experience? Or are we talking about where am I at in my soul's journey? And are we talking about like the universe or the multiverse? Are we talking about, like why we, like the specific reason why we chose to incarnate? So maybe like that's kind of what I would pose. And it's very much in line with what Michael and Emil were saying about like, being in nature, really tuning into our senses, like knowing ourselves and knowing the multidimensionality of this experience, and not limiting that to one specific line of thought or thread of knowledge.
Yeah, I get that. I think because as a species we tend to compare. I mean, it's probably most animals probably do, and so it might be a bit of a big-headed thing, but there's nothing we can really compare ourselves to except ourselves. Whereas animals in the masses, you can kind of compare them to one another, and if you want to say what's their purpose is to eat and be eaten, procreate, and they've come from origins, then going back to the soil. It's like there's a cycle there, and I think that's probably what the disconnect is. Because I know myself, because it's like, I guess they can then say, why are we here? I'm not really too concerned about that question. I do, because I have my opinions on that. But it's just interesting to know that even if you can say to yourself one day, I mean, we're an ever-changing species. I know one day, I know I know what I need to be doing. I know what feels right. Is it okay that we change? I'm sure it is. But it's just that because we can only compare ourselves to ourselves, I think that's what probably causes a lot of confusion for even those who feel like they've got it all on check, because we share a lot with the rest of the natural world, yet there's some massive differences as well. So I think that's probably why this even becomes a talking point, I know Moritz, Peter, and Dan blacked out. If anyone feel like jumping in, feel free. I'll set that now if you want.
I'll say one more thing, and then the other guys can jump in as well. I think what you said at the beginning about separating the survival instincts from like your purpose is really important, because so many of us kind of get trapped at the very, very small parts of ourselves. Like, right, there's obviously a survival aspect and dimension to our being, right? We're born, we procreate, we continue the species, and we kind of, that's what primates do, that's what animals do. So that's the animalistic kind of part of our nature and our being. And it's very important to understand that and to respect that. And if you ignore it or you don't acknowledge it, then it completely rules you, because it's just going to be always there. Like the monkey mind's always going to want to make sure it's safe, protected, and looking out for threats and things like that. So that's the huge part of our nature. And I think that society and hierarchy, the hierarchies in that are set up to kind of play to that all the time, to feed on the insecurities that are there. And if you don't feel safe and protected, and you don't have maybe a roof over your head and the basic needs met, you're perpetually stuck in that wheel. And there's like a hamster wheel, and everyone's on that wheel, like by default, the way the society is kind of running, and we're kind of plugged into that system. So if you're not able to ever step outside of that and look at what's happening there, you can't really let it go, because it kind of rules you, right? So people use debt, people use insecurities, fears, worries, doubts, you know, all kinds of stuff, just to sell you things and keep you on that hamster wheel. So you're never really able to step off it long enough to have the time to explore the other sort of dimensions of your being. And this is a game that's just played because if you can keep people busy and distracted and scared, then you can sell them, you know, solutions. You can sell them authority and say, you know, we have the answers, you know, vote for us or whatever. So I think that understanding that part of yourself and recognizing, acknowledging that has to be mastered and paid attention to, and you can't just spend all the time meditating if you haven't got those things figured out, because you're not going to be at peace. There's going to be part of you that's always going to be a little bit, you know, uneasy. And so Maslow's hierarchy of needs is kind of a useful framework. It's pretty crude, but in terms of the basic steps, it's important not to get stuck on that as the only thing to focus on. But, you know, taking care of making sure you have a roof over your head, you're cared for, you have enough money in the bank, you're not going to go hungry in the next few months, you know, and then how much time am I giving up to get those things? The more time you can claw back in your day and your week and your year and still have those needs met, then now your attention is kind of freed up, your energy is freed up, and we have so much energy and abundance that we can focus on other things. The other big part is that disconnection from nature, like you mentioned, there's a cycle of life here, and we're completely removed from it, because we don't even catch our food anymore. We're not really in the wild, and so we're missing a big core part of our being. I think I was going to do another show on like the 4 elements, which is basically something, you know, it goes back thousands of years, people talking about those core parts of our being that are in the environment and are in nature and are part of us. And if you're not regularly connected to those, you're kind of, it's like walking around with your arms chopped off. You can't, you know, you can't pick up things, you can't interact with your reality, you don't really understand where you are, you feel kind of lost. And again, that's an easy way to play on people when they're lost and they're not really integrated into their environment. So being indoors where there's only 500 lux of light from an indoor bulb versus under the sunlight where there's 100,000 lux of light, and how that light affects your, you know, your perception, your health, your mood, your energy, your everything, right? It's just like layers and layers that we're being removed and disconnected from slowly. So, you know, when we were agricultural people, we spent more time in the land. Then as obviously we moved indoors into cities and into jobs and offices, like wearing more and more clothes, more and more layers, under junk light, junk hair, like those are basically like snuffing out pieces of our of us, because we separate ourselves from nature and we think it's outside and we're in here, but actually we're always in, this is it, right? We're always in nature, but there's different maybe layers of fidelity. So if you're indoors, you're kind of like you're heavily filtered what comes into your perception and awareness. And then when you're constantly in that state for decades and you grow up like that, that's just normal. So like I said, we're kept in that very small sliver of reality, and we're constantly just fighting for that first layer of sort of hierarchy of needs, you know, just the basic survival of getting needs met, having food on the table, and not having sovereignty about how to do that, and having to plug into a system to have money to go shopping to have those things needs met. It kind of just, again, takes you out of nature and into the matrix to have those needs met, so then you can never have the time to really explore the other parts of your being. But yeah, so that's definitely been how I've kind of experienced that. As you get more time back, you can choose where to spend that time, and you know, I just choose to get more immersed into nature, and I remember more parts of myself. I'm like, oh yeah, this feels right. This feels much better. You know, that's how it's been for me.
Yeah, it's like a cycle going from where we were working the land to then going into our own homemade prisons to then make the funds or get ourselves a position where we can then be out on the land again, but not having to work to be on the land. If that makes sense, I guess. So yeah, interesting like that. Got any more? All you, mate?
Yeah, I just want to add some physical aspects that I've realized very strongly after visiting Michael in Portugal. How, again, like we live in this scarcity model where we are dependent on a lot of people just to be able to feed ourselves, and then we are not in the light, so we don't get the sunlight on our skin. So even that is removing us from that puts us automatically in the biggest scarcity mode ever, because we are missing the sun, and that scarcity then adds on into every areas of our lives, into our relationship where we become dependent on our wife because we think we cannot handle ourselves. But the key to this is, as Michael has been talking about for so long, and I realized just recently how important it really is if you start on building on that sunlight and the physical health benefits that comes with that, walking bare feet on the ground, get the sunlight in there, feel the power of the universe grow inside of you, then all your problems kind of seems very, very small compared to what you have. So you're basically connected to the biggest power plug in the universe, and then everything else, even the food becomes less important, the sleep becomes less important, the relationships become less important, everything becomes less important because you have the biggest power plug up your bum basically, and you don't need much else than that. And then what I felt in Portugal and recently with some of the experiences I've had is the stronger the physical vessel is, the more intuition you can take in as well, because you're filling your body with light, you're filling it with universal energy, life force, whatever, prana, chi, all these beautiful names for the same thing, which is life, invigorating power inside the vessel. And when you do that, then everything else becomes way more sensitive. You are way more connected to your brain, to your thoughts, to everything. Kind of like gaining the control back, where the control we normally give to the government or to someone else. But if we have that control, then we feel like suddenly everything feels different. The wind feels different, and you feel the cold less, and you become way more empowered and embodied. And from there on, I also feel like it's much easier to feel into what is good for you and what is bad for you, because all the stagnation in the body is kind of removed and everything is flowing. And when you feel the energy is flowing in the body, it feels you're way more reactive to whatever happens. You can actually feel if someone has a really bad energy coming towards you. It's almost like a little bit like the Matrix. You're trying to bounce off the energies to not get them stuck on you. But when you get that sensitive, and I think that comes from raising the energy, taking in more energy, then it's kind of easier to follow just the path that the universe has for you, because the mind will be more still, and you're not trying to control aspects. You're not in the scarcity mode, so you're not trying to gain more. You're just able to relax and release, and then just take in whatever comes, and you're way more sensitive to whatever comes, and you'll feel immediately. It's like immediate responses. So you feel like, oh, this didn't feel good, okay, I'll move over here, or oh, this feels kind of good, and then go towards that, like we're meant to be. And I think that's actually a lot about what Facebook is playing on, because we're so low on these dopamine hits and everything that normally comes from nature when we are in tune with our bodies. There's dopamine everywhere, just from the wind or from the hearing the water. All these things are supposed to create some kind of rhythm in us where we can just feel and be in touch with everything. But when we lose that connection and try to get that dopamine and serotonin from other places, then we're just stuck in this scarcity mode of dopamine and serotonin, and trying to add in as much information and stimuli as possibly from very bad sources. And so again, it has a lot to do with getting back into nature, filling up on all those reserves that we've lost through all the years inside. And then from there, it just feels effortless. Everything just feels like, wow,
like
it's funny little
action.
Yeah,
action comes like without any motivational force. You have to sort of force yourself to come up with. Like you just like to do things.
Exactly. It's when all those things are firing at their maximum, or not even the maximum, but probably only touched a little bit on it, because I'm still starting with all of this. But a small example from right now, before this meeting, I came out, had my hot cocoa in the hand, and my in-law dad, he was sewing some wood, and it made a lot of noise, and my mind started going, oh, if he's going to do that, then I can't have the meeting. But I just took a deep breath and I relaxed and said, okay, if I'm supposed to have this meeting here, I'll just sit down and see what happens. And he was done 1 minute to 11. He was done, and then he moved down there and said, hey, are you done? He said, yeah. So it's kind of like when you're in that state, and I think that's what people call the flow state, then everything just moves effortlessly, and you'll kind of feel into it, but you really need to relax and let the mind go, and then just be whatever it is. And it's a really beautiful experience. So
it really is. Like I've also noticed that, not only in terms of like when I'm doing stuff outside, and that's definitely where a lot of that comes from, and that allows me to sustain it even when I'm not outside. But I've been able to carry it through into my daily routine, daily activities, where I'm like effortlessly weaving like a meeting that I have after a task that I need to complete. Then I'm going to like meet somebody somewhere else, and I'm moving around. Like it comes naturally, and not even really putting in thought, but it's just like noticing things and then shifting them in my mind and sort of in reality through communication, and stuff just perfectly aligned. It's really amazing what can happen when you're sort of so tuned in and are able to listen to all the signals that your body is sending you, that you would otherwise be too anxious to really pay attention to, because you're just freaking out, oh, what's going to happen next, and how do I make everything fit together with everything else.
Yeah, 100%.
I think Nick still has his hand up.
Yeah. I was just, loving the flow of this conversation. I'm just going to echo what you guys are saying, and like, I feel like what we're touching on here is how I would describe as you're in nature and you're taking in the sunlight and you're tuning into who you are, and whether you're doing meditation or breath work, or you're starting to learn how to listen to yourself. What we're actually doing is learning how to communicate with whatever you want to describe as your higher self. So if you don't have that clear vessel of communication, and you've got like a really chattery mind, or you're not spending that time in the sunlight, or you have, physical ailments, or you have a lot of stress and anxiety, or you're trying to make it happen, you're trying to hustle, there's all of these things, or like your time is taken care of, and you can't really like relax into yourself, then it's really hard. I've found that it's really hard to be able to get a clear communication with that deeper knowing within myself of what that purpose is, like what I'm doing that day, or like my larger purpose, if you will. And so I feel like, depending on where we're at on our journey, like a lot of this kind of these different modalities can be just kind of like chiseling away at those things within us, which is kind of blocking that communication channel from that deeper knowing and that intuitive knowledge. And I really like what you guys are saying about relaxing into and letting our path unfold as well, because there's something really into being truly in the moment and being fully with what shows up, versus trying to force an outcome or trying to manifest something out of thought or out of the mind. There's a whole lot more flow, there's a whole lot more creativity, there's a whole lot more spark of whatever you want to call it, that's coming from more of the heart energy, if you're able to just be with what shows up, and to allow it to come through, instead of like forcing it or making it happen. And this is what tends to lead to a lot of things like burnout, and a lot of that hustle porn that Moritz talked about in the previous podcast as well. And then the last thing I just wanted to bring into the conversation was with when Lynn was mentioning about the only thing we have to compare ourselves to is ourselves. I think it's for me, I like to really zoom out and to look at the path that humans have taken, and I believe that from what I've learned from different indigenous people that teachings, is that humans have been in a long sequence of evolution and devolution. And so it seems as though, like, through cataclysmic events and through different cycles in time, that there have been previous advanced human civilizations, and that we have had far more technology than what we have now. And there are familiar people that you guys would know, and that's just only part of the equation. But 12,500 years ago or so is one of those. There's also like 25,000, 75,000 year cycles. And so sort of like that comes back into that, like, knowing yourself and sort of that purpose is just kind of potentially a whole lot more than what we've been led to believe, rather than it's kind of like coming from cavemen or coming from monkeys or whatever it may be. So and then there's kind of like, this just to bring like the human evolution story. There is the out of Africa model, and there's also the out of Australia as well. The Aborigines here in Australia, some of them believe that they've been here for 4.5 million years. Scientists will tell you that anything over 400,000 years is completely crazy. I'm fully aware that a lot of the literature says 70,000 years old. But so I guess what I'm saying is there's the kind of like these levels of there's these levels of purpose, which are kind of like, you talk about comparing to other humans and where we're at now and kind of what we've been like, what's around us. There's kind of, there's a whole lot more to our, I believe, our purpose and our human experience. There's depth of experiences of who we are than just kind of, seeing things through certain lenses, and what Michael's and Emil and all of you guys are talking about is like through these nature and through spending time in the sunlight and getting our health sorted out and our physicality sorted out and our breathing sorted out. It allows that flow to happen so we can learn more about that. So we just intuitively we know what to do in the moment. We know who we are. We know where we're going, or we don't know. We have no idea, and we're okay with that because we're able to relax and be comfortable with not knowing what the outcome will be, but we know that we're going in the right direction. So it's like the paradox of it all.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. There's two things that you said I want to touch on. One was like the goal setting mindset, which is like, I need to set goals so I feel like I know where I'm going, because that gives me some certainty. And that's what people look for in life when they don't really understand themselves and know who they are. So I think that setting goals has become such a big part of what we define as success.
I never set goals.
Yeah, you set a goal to make a certain amount of money in your business. You set a goal to retire at a certain age. You set a goal to buy a house. You set whatever those goals are, to get married by a certain age, whatever it is, like start having kids at this age, like all those predefined kind of rituals almost that become sort of goal setting. And we aspire to be like whatever is success model we look around us. And that's when you compare it to people. Other people, that's also becomes a problem, because you're like, oh, I'm not successful because I haven't reached these goals, whatever those stupid goals are, wherever they came from. No one questions where those goals came from. So I think getting away from goal setting, and people really struggle with that. Like, if you're an entrepreneur and you're like, what do you mean you don't have any goals? Like, you need to set some goals. How are you going to get anywhere? So it's like the default mode is set goals to have momentum to go down a path. Otherwise, you're somehow not going to be able to do anything or function in life or get out of bed without a goal. So I think being just more comfortable in the day-to-day moment and having more moments of presence will slowly let you put those goals into perspective and make sure they're not stealing or taking away from you sort of joy and meaning in the present moment and life in general. So like, if you have a business and you're making money, how much more do you need to make? Is it going to add to the more joy and meaning you have day to day, or is it starting to take away and eat into that because, can't spend time with your family or can't take time, whatever, like in the morning for yourself? So the goal setting thing is probably like the number one thing I've kind of faced as an entrepreneur, and trying to understand that and then put that in context of like, okay, yeah, goals can be useful to kind of focus the mind sometimes, like 3 things I want to get done today type of thing. But like this, huge ideology or dogma around goal setting to success is probably like, has a diminishing return at some point. So you got to kind of keep an eye on that and see how it feels, and not judge yourself by your goals. How close am I to my goals? That defines whether I'm happy or sad today or this month or this quarter. Like, the whole world runs on quarterly results and goals. Like the whole corporation capitalist model runs on this, and it's completely disconnected us from like day-to-day joy, moment, presence, meaning. So I think that's probably a huge issue. I'm going to hand over to Dan, but I got one other point to say, which is that like Lynn's original question, what's our life purpose? Why are we here? To understand why you're here, you need to understand where we came from. And that's a big part of what Nick was saying, is like, we've been so disconnected from ourselves in the present, but also in the past and the history and the richness of what it has gone on there, like the evolution of us on all different, continents at all different times. We probably understand a fraction of that, and all the history that's dug up that doesn't conform to the model is just kind of dismissed, right? It's like it's hidden, it's buried away, it's locked up somewhere. No one gets access to this stuff. That information is used kind of against us in some ways, because if you have more information than everyone else, you can kind of use that to control people and influence the direction of society. And also, just if people are disconnected, again, they're less in power and control of themselves. So you kind of keep that over them. So I think that where we come from is probably like a whole other episode of like rabbit holes we can go down. Like Nick kind of alluded to some of these things, but yeah, it's super interesting when you go into some of the archaeological stuff, some of the evolution, going back to Egypt and beyond. That makes you kind of question, okay, how much do we really know about any of this? And why do we take it so seriously that what the experts tell us is true? Because we know the experts are lying to us today. They're probably lying to us about yesterday and the last few thousand years. So I think getting away from thinking we know anything with such certainty in the past is probably a big part of like allowing it to come through, like the truth and the knowledge that's going to come through to us. And like probably Nick and a few of the guys here have been on that journey of like just going down and exploring and just seeing what comes up and seeing how it feels, and being able to hold multiple models in your mind and those paradoxes, and not getting like, I need to know the absolute truth right now, otherwise my brain's going to explode. I'm just going to hold these ideas, I'm going to let them percolate, and then I'll see what comes from me and see what feels right. And again, more time in nature, around other people who are more heart-centered, like indigenous peoples and things like that, that probably will unlock a lot of knowledge to where we came from, and therefore why are we here and what's our life purpose. It's all
and
connected.
where we're going.
Yeah, for sure. But Dan had his hand up, so I'll hand over to him.
Yeah, but do you really need to know where you're going? That's the question. Do you? That's the question. Again, this comes back in, because if you need to know where you're going, then that presumes that you have a long-term goal.
I don't mean need to know. I don't need to know, but like having an idea of what's likely to sort of what are sort of the things happening in the world. I think it's sort of just understanding what the world is like, and then if you understand what the world is like, you can understand sort of what certain directions are that things will move into, and that is sort of all that I'm saying. Not that you need to know where you will end up or what's your ultimate goal, or like where you will finally come to rest or something like that.
Yeah, so I guess identifying cycles and where you are on that cycle. I just want to pull back actually, because everything you guys, it's funny. The funny thing is about this group is there's never any disagreement between anyone. And it's probably the only group where you have a talk and there's nobody ever argues or refutes anyone's points, because let's face it, everything everyone's saying is true or comes from a true place or a true source. One analogy I wanted to pick up actually was the what Michael said about capitalism and quarterly growth and all these things, and said that there is and the analogy, I can't remember how the analogy exactly went, but there is only one thing on this planet there's an illness within the human body that thrives on growth, and that's cancer. So continual growth without any cycles is cancerous, and it will continue to grow and spread. But I digress from what I actually wanted to say. I mean, I think with goal setting, which is the point I wanted to make. With goal setting, you kind of have two. You can't set goals, and this comes back to the kind of primal survival mechanisms. You can't set goals for yourself while you're in a constant state of survival mode. And like you said, most people, due to health and lack of connection with nature, are in that state all the time. So they think they're setting goals, but those goals aren't accurate for them, because they just basically need to pull themselves out of the situation they're in. I know this, well, my experience of this was to do with starting a business, having a business running for 11 years, in periods of the business where it was a struggle living in London to actually have food on the table for my young family at the time, which there's three children involved. So then you're constantly in exactly what you're saying, being pulled back into the matrix, this cycle of trying to survive and just trying to get through and trying to break that financial goal so that there is food on the table. And the weird thing is, the business never really got successful until I fixed my health. So as soon as I fixed my health, the business took off, and then I stopped caring about what goals, where the business went. And right now, people ask me, where do you want to be in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, 10 years? I haven't got a clue. I get asked this by consultants, by our FD all the time. He said, how can I plan for you? How can I plan what we're going to do if you don't know where you want to be in 5 years? I said, well, because I'm just going along, and as long as I've got food on the table right now, and I continue to have food on the table until I'm dead, I don't really care. I'll just go with it, go with the ups and go with the downs, and just ride the cycle. But I really cannot plan. I'm the worst goal setter probably ever, and you're made to feel guilty about it a lot of the time. And you're like, oh, I don't set goals, that's why I haven't achieved this. And then you realize, I haven't achieved what? Well, I've achieved more by not doing anything than I have by trying to do things. So now, like you say, just flow. And that's it. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I think I'll make one quick point and I'll hand it over, which is that a lot of this business and entrepreneurship is focusing on the engine, but not the driver. Like you said, if your body's not healthy, how successful is the business going to be? You're going to crash and burn at some point. And I mean, even the CEOs of these big corporations, they look like slobs. They just wear themselves out into the ground, and then they get fed back into the matrix, and then the wheels keep turning on this corporation, but it just chews up humans and spits them out basically. And that's kind of, I think, the model that we're supposed to aspire to, is to like be a CEO of a big corporation. I'm like, no thanks, that's not really for me. So I think being aware that you can focus on the engine in the car as much as you like whether that be business or finance or your whatever it is, entrepreneurship. But if you don't understand the driver, like the driver is where the optimization happens. You look at Formula One, it's all about the drivers. They're the ones that make or break the success, not the car. And I think we spend so much time focusing on the car and not the driver. And that's a huge cost to society, but to our own mental, physical health. Once you focus on the car, maybe you realize you don't need to be driving at 200 miles an hour every day, all day long to be happy. That's probably what keeps society going, is that just perpetual, growth, like you said, is definitely like a good analogy to cancer, how cancer spreads. If there's not a cycle, you don't have cycles of growth, and then, anabolism and catabolism. If you just have anabolism inside the body all day long, you just use constant growth, and that's not sustainable. And that's kind of the model we're on, right? It's like we don't look at the total cost of that growth. And it's the same thing day to day. Like if you're just constantly pushing and setting goals and not just giving space for allowing what you have and enjoying what you have, without your foot on the pedal, then it's not going to be balanced. At some point, you're going to burn out, or just not be able to even enjoy what you've created, whatever surplus that is.
There is just on quickly on that point there, in regards to the constant expansion being cancerous. There is some wisdom around that's been in some indigenous wisdom to do with the constant expansion and contraction of the universe, like the breath. So there's that constant like breathing in and out, like our breath, and so that fractals out into the universe. So there's a kind of like natural flow of outward expansion and then the contraction as well. I just wanted to briefly mention that.
Good. I just want to say something about health again, like why it's so important. Is I think what I found out is that a lot of people say this as well, and it's also in quantum physics when you look at it, if you want this scientific model for it. But we are basically the ones creating our reality, pulling in all the things into our reality that we need. And it feels like when our health is low, which means low life force into the body or whatever, then the things that come out of that is not optimal. It's kind of like on a side path on where some other stuff is going on, and some of it can be used as triggers to come back on the main path where life is just flowing through you like a vessel. And when it is flowing like that, we are pulling in the most amazing things. Like that is the flow state, when we pull in the exact right person at the right time, and a car moves away and there's a parking spot for us when we're late to the meeting. All these things happen because of the health. So without the health, first, I think Michael also wrote about this a few weeks ago, that it's actually linked to serotonin and dopamine, how we're able to manifest our reality. So if we're not getting enough sleep, we're not getting the right foods, we're not getting enough sunlight, all these things, melatonin and dopamine, serotonin will be low, and we're not manifesting the optimal reality, which is not being in the flow, which is not living our purpose, basically. So it's just really interesting how the health is actually the number one thing we should just focus on. Being optimally healthy, in nature, connected, having life force flowing through us in the best ways possible, then all the good things will happen. And I never saw that link before. I was trying to manifest all the right things so I could create my health afterwards. But if you focus on the health first, all the other things will flow freely and easily. And it's been very clear to me these last few days that everything is linked to the vessel. The vessel is basically this biomechanical meat machine that if we keep that in tune, then everything is possible. But if it lacks life force, then everything will seem like very dull. The colors will be different. Everything is just different. And what I think is that the more we build on that energy and the more we're able to take in, the more the path will actually show itself through the body, through the DNA, which they also call they actually call the DNA keys, I believe, or something like that. I think there's possibilities to unlock some of this information which has been stored. So we don't actually need to read many history books. We don't actually need to know all this stuff. We just need to stay calm enough, build on that energy, and the body will reveal the path of the history of what happened before and where we're able to go, because all the information is stored in the DNA. And it's just really interesting that the more relaxed you get, the more in tune with your body get, the more information you feel like you're drawing from somewhere. You don't know where it is, but it's definitely something that's coming from somewhere. And I have a theory or a feeling that it might be coming from the DNA, from the body, which is unlocking, which is getting the energy it needs, and then it's sending off small informations from different lifetimes or whatever it's coming from, or universal information. And it's just really interesting.
Probably like a biological cryptography, where the sunlight would unlock. The sunlight would be the public key for your private key within your DNA that would unlock exactly that, to bring it back to crypto. But you're the only person here who's actually in the right environment to be having this call, because you're the only one that's outside.
Emil's winning.
10 points to Emil. Lynn, why aren't you outside?
Because it's bloody London. That's why I'm outside.
There's no excuse.
My nipples are chafed.
There's no excuse. There's no excuse. Put on a jumper and get outside.
I've had a cold shower today. I've done my bit.
What's the temperature outside, Emil?
Let me just check. Actually, I can have a look. There's a temperature thermometer in the sun, which actually gets quite hot. It's actually 30 degrees in the sun.
Hey,
can you see it? But
where are you, Emil?
I'm in Sweden, but the air temperature is around 0 or 5 degrees. But in the sun, with no wind, it's perfect. So I'm actually, the reason I'm out here, actually, the main reason, of course, I know it's good for me, but actually I'm very sensitive to EMF. So if I would be sitting inside, I would really feel like shit. I would feel the tension building up in the body, especially around the stomach area where the dantian is, all the energy is stored. I get
exactly the same issue in the exact same spot when I'm surrounded by Wi-Fi. Luckily, I've hacked my office now, so I've hacked all the routers in the house, so there's literally zero EMF, and I constantly check it like at least twice a week in case anything's changed, any exogenous signals coming from outside the house. But where I am is there's space around me, so it doesn't affect me. But
you have a wire on your phone as well, that might help a little bit.
Yeah, it does indeed. In Sweden actually has more sun than the UK, doesn't it?
Mm.
I think so.
It does.
Always.
Yeah, I mean, I think London, well, the UK and Ireland are generally probably at the lowest amount of sun hours throughout the whole of Europe. So,
it keeps people inside working in the factories, get the industrial revolution going. So
sounds like the wrong place to be.
Well, I mean,
you could still be outside though, Lynn.
Yeah, I know. I think my ancestors once upon a time, but yeah.
I think we should all make effort to have this call outside.
I was thinking about doing that myself actually, because I've got a big patch at the back of the flats. So leaning against the car, feet on the floor, shoes off, should be fine. But question, you guys, something that came to mind during this call. Obviously, the purpose of getting out and away from these things, immersing yourself in sunlight to make yourself more resilient. Not that you'd say it's a negative, because it's good, because it's basically alerting you to a warning, I guess, of something that's not good for you. But have you found it a bit more intolerable to kind of living in? Well, I mean, I was saying like Emil, being indoors, EMF frequencies can basically, you feel it. Same with Dan as well. You're saying the same thing that you guys as well. You find that even though you're technically making yourself a lot healthier, has it made some elements of life a lot more intolerable?
Yeah, you become addicted to the sun. You literally cannot. Once you've connected to it, you cannot give it up. It feels like such a massive loss to be like indoors for a week at a time. I mean, I did a trade show in London beginning of last month, and I was inside in artificial light for about 7 days, and all I could think about was just trying to get outside. I just didn't care about anything else. It just it literally becomes like a bit overbearing, and you become a bit like, well, not neurotic, but you just realise that just until you get outside, you can't regain your thoughts and various other bits and pieces. I mean, there was even Jack Cruz did a podcast the other day with, I can't remember who it was, with I don't know the guy, but it was at night, and they'd done it inside in LA, and you could just see he just wasn't as sharp as he normally is, like switched on. You just see it was draining. But he was talking about the exact same topic of if you are used to being outside a lot and spending most of your time outside, as soon as you come inside, you feel the energy does drain, and then you kind of feel you need to recharge all the time. So yeah, it does have a kind of net.
I think it's the good kind of intolerance. Like it's a sensitivity that you develop that tells you something meaningful about your environment that you can then take action on. But I think the point is not to then become addicted to the sun. Like you can definitely increase and ratchet up that significantly without a negative side effect. But I
like
think
an old Portuguese sunbather.
Yeah, I think the point then is to be able to have that range and be able to stay make use of the full range of possibility, like both the sun as well as the dark, and staying there, but then always noticing, okay, now I'm actually running low, maybe I should be going out again. That's I think what it's for.
Yeah, like it's an inbuilt alert mechanism to keep yourself in tune and running at optimum frequencies. Yeah, I agree. I maybe addiction's the wrong word, but then I'm not 100% convinced that addiction is always a bad thing. But that's a whole nother topic.
That's
a whole nother topic.
Because it implies something about like non-voluntariness, you know? Like it doesn't mean that you can't spend a lot of time on something and it's always bad, but addiction, in me at least, evokes the association that you cannot not do it, and so it's something, another force acting on you and taking agency away from you.
Yeah,
it's not taking place within limits where it's making sense. So, like for example, when it starts to eat away at your social relationships or like your actual life. Movement, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I guess. But then certain people form poor habits or requirements. I would just a flippant example would be people's requirements to have to eat a lot of sugar in their diet. But the sugar is because they're in a low energy state, so they are addicted to the sugar. But the sugar is what's keeping their life form, albeit operating at a lower frequency, but it's still keeping their life form going. So it's a requirement for them in that particular state that they actually need it. Now, is that I don't know. I digress. It's just semantics about the word, really. Where I'll go with this.
Right.
Actually,
I could relate to that. Actually,
worth talking about.
Yeah. It's like well, like exercise. If I haven't exercised with purpose for a couple of days, I feel that maybe that's what it is like kind of that sort of feeling. Because I'm not. Unfortunately, I will get there one day. I'm not had at a stage of being able to get prolonged sun exposure like you chaps. But I can only assume that it's similar to some extent, maybe even more powerful than if I haven't done any half decent exercise to maybe that sort of feeling. Okay.
Same thing, release endorphins when you work out. Same thing as being in the sunlight, you get the beta endorphin release, and that's the same thing you crave from other things when you're missing sunlight and exercise. So yeah, those things are all feedback, like something's missing. There's one point, and then I'll hand over to the guys who actually got their hands raised, which is Nick and Emil. But there's one point that again was like understanding where you've come from to understand where you are, and a big part of your physiology, like for you, Lynn, for example, like you have obviously like darker genes, right? Darker.
Fake tan, mate.
Well, I've known you a while, so you've been keeping up pretty long. But that's a really good point that people forget is like we've evolved. As we moved outside of the tropics and moved away to these light or darker and darker conditions, we've obviously got lighter and lighter to absorb more sunlight. But then what's happened recently is like these northern hemisphere countries have become like the economic powerhouses of today. And so people aspire to go work there and live there. Like the Indians move there, black people move there, but their genes are not evolved for those conditions, even less so than white people. And everyone's now living indoors, even the white people. So it's like, if you're black and you're Indian and you've gone outside of your, genetic evolution or adaptation, you're going to have massive cost to your health just by being in that climate. And then when you go indoors, another massive loss. So it's like, you're going to feel that scarcity, like that biological scarcity is going to play on you harder. It's going to be even harder for you to like feel great. Not to say you can't do it by like just being outside more and exercising and having some basic things right. But I think you're just it's almost like you're fighting your physiology a little bit. And people don't even understand that. Like, no one talks about this stuff. Everyone just assumes a dude is a dude, you know, a guy's a guy, a man's a man, a woman's a woman. But
The myth of equality wrecking everything.
it's huge variation, man. You can't fight that.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. Actually, that was one of the topics that I'd listed about gender equality and how that should be discussed. But we could probably say that for another time.
Yeah, just got a quick in thing there, Emil. You're really. I'm not a jealous chap, but you got your top off now. You're just sitting in it. I might have to relocate. I hope my Wi-Fi can extend that far. Yeah.
You're more than welcome to join me.
Lynn, have you ever been on a sunbed?
Only once, right? But it was a dare, so I did it. I only done it once.
No,
it was a dark.
I think you could use it. You could use it as an adjunct to like once a week to see how that affects your dopamine. When I was in the UK and when I wasn't particularly well prior to moving out to Spain, I was doing maybe 1 or 2 10-minute sunbed sessions. You got to pick the right tubes. You got to find the tubes that still have the UVB. And obviously you start at 5 minutes and you build up. But I think I was up to about 20 minutes a week, and I'd do that most weeks. And generally, that massively kept me on a level, like just a far better level than anything that I'd felt before living in the UK.
Okay.
It's something that I would definitely a suntan bed.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some science around the benefits of having the first sun rays of the day and the last of the day as well. So it's kind of like picking and choosing when you want to do it. I actually live where the sun first hits the earth each day. So that's one of the particular reasons why I chose this location, because I'm in the UK as well, and so there's obviously like a whole lack of sunlight there. But I know Jack Cruz and that crew are kind of into the first sunlight of the day and the last of the day as well. But just moving on a little bit from just about the sunlight, one thing that I wanted to, well, at least on the addiction part, Gabor Mate, who's one of the addiction experts in the world, he talks about addiction being from a lack of connection. So I almost want to distinguish between kind of knowing what's good for you and getting a lot of sunlight from that addictive quality, because it's kind of, I feel like that's kind of, you're getting more of a connection versus like a symptom of a lack of connection. I just wanted to add in that part. And then just for the people that are listening or watching, that there's been a lot of talk about getting in the sunlight, looking after our health, and and sort of relaxing and sort of getting these things in order so we can have that connection to ourselves, so we can know what our purpose is and that kind of thing. And one of the big things that I feel like that needs to be addressed, at least from my experience, is the shadow side and the trauma side of our experience here as well. Because if we haven't seen all aspects of ourselves, and the traumatic parts, whether it be from experiences in our life, or whether it be from birth itself, or anything else in between. If there's parts of ourselves that we haven't addressed, that are blockages, whether they have a physical manifestation or a mental manifestation, and we've got these thought loops, if we've got these traumas that we're holding in our energetic field in some way, then these different processes that people can go through, modalities, are ways in which we can kind of begin to clear some of that, so we can get a better understanding of that knowing and our purpose. Because I feel like unless, I guess what I'm saying is, like, I've gone and done things like 10 days like Vipassana, 21 days Vipassana, and it's a way to get that connection to knowing what our purpose is in some way. But there's underlying, if there's underlying traumas or there's underlying things that we haven't seen or that aren't addressed, then things like meditation, things like getting in the sun and these other modalities are only going to be able to take us to a certain place until we have to address them. So I just wanted to bring in the some things that people might not necessarily want to see or deal with all the time is the shadow side or the traumatic side of the things that I feel like we all experience and can transmute as part of this process.
And how do you feel into that, Nick? Is that using plant medicine and shamanism type stuff, or is it a particular modality you like, or is it just different for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is part of the learning experience, right? For me personally, it's been breath work and dealing with things like birth trauma. That's a whole nother topic that I can talk a little bit about. But being born into the world and being cut off from our umbilical cord, taken away from our mother, and being like treated with harsh gloves and being in a sterile environment, these can kind of have an impact on how we perceive the world and that kind of thing. But like earth, air, water, fire, I tend to, like you guys, I like to go beyond ideologies and modalities as much as I can and really get into the elements as much as I can. But definitely plant medicine's been a bunch of it, sweat lodges, vision quests, breath work and whatever modality you want to use basically. But they're the key ones that I've sort of, meditation, drinking lots of water, getting lots of sunlight, looking after your health, mitochondria, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think like finding out where the stress is stuck in your body and learning about your physiology and that autonomic nervous system. So the breath is a big part of that because it kind of links the two. And most people are just stuck in that chronic stress state where then you can never really have awareness of where things are stuck and you're just constantly reacting. But whenever you can get yourself into a place where, you can relax really deeply, then things will just come up into your conscious awareness, like could be memories, like you said, things you just never even thought about. I haven't gone into like birth trauma or anything like that. I'm not sure if that was an issue for me, but I guess most people, a lot of people born in hospitals and these kind of unnatural, hostile environments. It definitely is. There could be a number of traumas. So I think it's hard for everyone to like maybe access that, but it probably comes when you're in a natural environment and energy is moving more freely, and then wherever that's stuck or trapped will probably energy would flow through it and you would have some memory or something, then it can spark something to work on. So
and some people just may need some simple counseling, as mainstream as that is. They might just need someone to talk to process some of their emotions or some of their feelings so they can actually begin to listen to themselves, because learning how to listen is a real skill. Like deepening that experience so we can actually listen to what's showing up. It's like, it's one thing to say to be in nature and to listen, but are you actually able to listen through all of the stuff that's going on? So there's I think some things are often overlooked, like like especially like in the personal development realms, and I think like being able to process things, whether it be in the emotional body or the physical body or the whatever body you want to talk about, like there's many different levels to it. And I think it's, as you chip away, you begin to get a better understanding of what you need in each moment.
But I like how we're focusing on like bodily exercises or just using the body rather than going deep into the mind, because there's this danger of even encountering, like when you go to a therapist, for example, and I know a friend of mine who's doing that, you need to make sure that you find the therapist who's gone through deeper shit than you, or at least as deep shit as you, because if he doesn't, then you will either wound him with the deep shit that you yourself carry with you, and he will not be able to actually help you make progress through it other than through theoretical sort of stuff and through exercise. So I like that we're focusing on the body, because that's something that everybody has access to. It's not really something you need to rely on somebody else to teach you all kinds of stuff. Of course, you can get introduced to stuff, you can get initiated, you can get accelerated in your journey, but everybody of us has access to the sun and also already carries a body with them and can just play with that. And so I like that. That's, at least from my awareness, it's starting to make a comeback in general, sort of expanding our understanding to dealing with trauma, or in dealing with trauma, to not only be a mental or sort of soul exercise, but a body exercise. I really like that.
Definitely. Emil, you go on.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that, because I want to link it together with the question that Lynn had about being outside and how you feel the difference from going inside. And it is becoming like an addiction, because you definitely feel the energy is totally different inside. Unless you have some kind of spiral building or you're living inside of a pyramid, you're probably able to harness some of the same energy, so you can be inside and get some of the good stuff still. But I definitely feel it. And I also feel how a lot of all the other stuff I did before introducing as much sunlight as I'm doing now is massaging the mind, basically. So I would go into ayahuasca ceremonies or other ceremonies, and I would go into all this deep trauma, and I could feel like how they would release in the body, and then the mind would start massaging it and start working on it. And now I literally feel like the same thing is happening with the sunlight, but it's just burning through the whole shit. So I don't have to process it the same way. It's still stuck in the body, but the body is just opening up all these, whether it's the DNA or the fat cells that stores toxins if you go to the physical level, but they also store energy, and that energy is released when you're able to push through this much light and this much energy through doing yoga bare feet, taking the sun in. Then it feels like the trauma, the physical trauma and the mental trauma is just getting blown off like steam, and without having to puke and burp in the middle of the night and scream and all these things, it just feels effortless. So I actually asked Michael what he thought about that. Well, do we need to go through all the dark shit to experience the light? And a lot of people talk about this in duality, like, oh, we need to have all the bad shit so we know when we're really feeling good and when the good shit is good. But what I'm feeling now is like, why do I need all the bad shit? I can just feel good all the time. And it's kind of like a big dream for everyone. Can we really feel this good all the time? I think we probably can, if we can be outside in the sun all the time. If we can change our reality to be outside, bare feet on the ground, work outside or whatever we want to do, then we can feel amazing the whole time. We don't need all the other shit. And kind of lie.
Only if it's based on like actual like strong capacity, rather than like when you notice something negative in your awareness, trying to run away from it. Like I notice people who have this sort of, oh, I can just be good all the time and nothing negative will ever happen to me. And then they become completely pathological because they are just putting everything potentially negative out of their awareness and are running away from it. And then they get hit like a bus, like by a bus when the thing actually comes to pass. Like a lot of this is actually the American school of like positive thought or positive thinking, you know, like positive psychology, where like, oh, just think good thoughts and good things will happen. And yeah, there is some truth to that. And there's sort of this magical quality of creating your reality by imagining what will happen in the future if you just do vision quests and whatever. And it does work, but it can have this perverse effect of then also you self-sorting yourself away from everything that's negative around you, and then not wanting to engage even with people who need perhaps your help and who you could help because you have the capacity to do so, but because they're sort of poor or not in a good space or not giving off the greatest vibes, like you just go away from it. And there, of course, you don't have to help everybody and do everything positive for other people, but like there is always some downside if it's not within limits that are recognized as valid.
It's a really good point I want to make as well to that. Yeah. Sorry, whoever I cut off. I can't raise my hand on this because I'm the Zoom host. But to your point, Moritz, it's like who you can help or choose not to help and turn away from. I think what I was saying to Emil before was like, basically the more time you spend in nature and in the sun, you really get to know like what's your stuff and what's everyone else's stuff. And then you can really start to work on what's your stuff. And that's the key, is like when you're constantly indoors and around a bunch of other depressed people or just disconnected people, it's really hard to know what's yours, what's theirs, what am I feeling, well, you know, what's mine, and it all kind of gets mixed up. You just don't have very good sensitivity of those things. So once you really get to know yourself, and for me that was isolation, just being totally alone for 2-3 months and in nature, no other people, not even my wife. That was really good to know, okay, this is mine, that's not mine. And when I sense something that's not mine, I don't need to get attached to it. I can just understand, recognize what it is. I can try and help that person, support that person. And actually, the more of a surplus I feel in myself and the more abundance I feel, the more energy I have to give to other people, and it doesn't take away from me. If I'm giving from a deficit, that's when I'm going to resent it. That's when I'm going to burn out. That's when I'm going to have expectations of something given in return. So that kind of conditional love is how we're all programmed, because we're kind of operating from a deficit. And that's a huge other topic of like unconditional love and conditional love. But I really feel when you have a surplus and you know what's yours and you kind of work through some stuff, you really can give unconditionally that love. And that, that's huge. That's what we need more of in the world.
Michael, when was that 2-3 months solo?
That was just starting January actually. Came out here Portugal mid-January up until about mid-March, end of March when my wife came over.
It's like an emotional version of libertarianism. Like Lucia, you saying what you're saying remind me of reading Atlas Shrugged, but not about the money bit, but about get yourself sorted, and only from that position can you then be a better, more productive use around here. I don't know.
Definitely. But I like the way the show's going. It seems like everyone's getting naked, so obviously it's working wherever we're talking about.
Put an age rating up before you know it.
Hey, we got to keep the attention of our viewers, you know.
It turned into the Kardashians, Jordan, Bennett. Yeah.
This will be an incentive to our audience to not only consume it in podcast form, but in actual video form. So.
Yeah, we might need to rename this as well. I think something to do.
Yeah, we should get Toppler's video responses about people's life purpose and what they think about it.
Guy's gone wild, definitely.
So yeah, Lynn, I don't know if that answers any of your questions about life purpose, or I think we can go probably deeper into some of the stuff like where we come from. The history for me is one of the most interesting things that is probably totally suppressed, and I'm sure Nick and a few other guys have gone into that.
100%.
So
I think this actually does kind of, because what this conversation has made me think is that instead of just I mean not that I was, but you know, there's parts of me definitely do this. Looking for your purpose is not just thinking, okay, I'll look for my purpose, like saying your dream job and all that. Just look for my dream job. It's create your circumstances so it then can come to you, is what it seems to be picking up. So make sure you've got all your bits right, your body's in the right place, which will then bring your mind to the right place, and then it will come to you, or the multiple purposes will come to you, or maybe none. But it's putting yourself into the situation to be able to receive it, that wisdom. Yeah, it seems to be what I've taken away. So I like that a lot. But yeah, I'm interested when Nick and Emil were talking about, I know Rupert wasn't here for that bit, Emil talking about, you know, the idea that there's potential, has been greater civilizations in the past, and then I think Nick's saying something, or Nick's saying, I can't remember who was saying that, and then it makes me think of the idea that we've probably all heard of it, where doing what we're doing here is kind of like trying to, via DNA, maybe other forces, get back to where we were, whether that's a good or a bad thing, because there was some sort of destruction, whether that was man-made or maybe external. But that's definitely, when you guys have mentioned, that'd be an interesting topic. I'd like to even just sit back and listen to, let alone
I'd love to do another episode on that potentially. I mean, I've been to Egypt a few times, and I've been, you know, you go through those places and others as well, whether it be like, you know, there's places like other pyramids like Gunung Padang in Indonesia, there's in Cambodia, there's Angkor Wat, there's a lot of sites in India as well. But you go to these places, and I've been to them with some of like the leading engineers and machinists in the world, and also with the leading Egyptologists and understanding people, like the whole academia of Egyptology and how far off it really is from what's actually going on there, and you know, the way they are able to cut through rocks and the hardness grade of the tools that they were supposed to have available at that time, and the age of the things, you know, like say, you know, like the according to Hakim Orwian, he believes that the Sphinx is at least 48 to 52,000 years old, probably closer to 100,000 years old. If you look at the work of, his name escapes me at the moment, but if you look at some of the geological studies to do with the water levels, like the water levels at the Sphinx show that there was water there that hasn't been there for at least 30,000 years. Yeah, Robert Schoch, that's what I'm looking for. And so, you know, you start to bring some of these things into perspective, where they're able to manipulate matter, they're able to use water, they're able to use sound healing and harmonics to amplify energy as pyramids as power stations, and able to potentially levitate rocks and cut through hard rocks like they're butter. And then sort of you start to listen to the way that they like wrote and thought about things about our true nature, and having things like 360 senses, and our senses are aspects of nature, and the way that they would use water and plants and sound and merge themselves with the elements, and all of these kind of things, and the cycles upon cycles upon cycles throughout time. And then you start to, like, coronal mass ejections and all these kind of things, and these megalithic buildings, and even beyond patriarchy, beyond matriarchy, where there's like there's been like there's this like far more levels to the history that we haven't been told, or that we haven't remembered yet. And so there's kind of like a chunk which we're being told is like the be all and end all to where we've come from. But the pharaohs and all that kind of stuff, that was like much later. Like, and then like the kings and the men running the show. Before that, the women were running the show. And then the whole like slave thing of Egypt and all that kind of thing wasn't built by slaves, and all that kind of thing wasn't impossible. And so like then they start to come up with theories around like potentially 80 people building it versus like thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of slaves. And you start to think about, well, we can't even do this now with our world's best engineers and scientists and historians and all of that. We can't even do that now with our best minds and people. And these guys are talking about potentially being able to do it with 80 people. And then you start to think about, okay, well, what's our purpose, and like what was their purpose back then, and so like that's there's a whole kind of I was actually going to make a documentary on this kind of stuff earlier in the year, but I didn't end up doing it. Not myself. Like, I was going to be helping create, like putting it all together. I wasn't going to be the person talking about the knowledge, but I've spent decent amounts of time with people that that run these tours around the world, and it's been a real blessing to be able to sit there and have direct experience about, okay, what does the leading Egyptologist say, or whatever country it is in the world that you're in, what does the leading kind of mystic say, and then sort of see with your own eyes, okay, well, that's definitely not possible to be able to have a hammer and a chisel or whatever they say it is, because it's just actually technically not possible. And then you start to get into the power structures, and you start to get into the different like layers that are imposed on top of it, and you're not allowed to even meditate or pray or anything on any of these sites. They come and hurry you along, and so it's kind of like, they don't want any pagan rituals going on. And so there's a whole kind of many layers to it, and I think what this is speaking to, like to tie this into the topic that we're talking about now, is like the purpose, and it's kind of like a lot of this knowledge and hidden knowledge and oral law and indigenous law and natural law, and they're kind of like these hints to kind of who we really are and remembering who we are. It's kind of a lot of that's kind of like really ties into our purpose and why we're here and why we've chosen to incarnate at this time, where we can understand these cycles of times and really kind of create something at an experiential level, which is allowing us to go beyond what we've been before, and also while at the same time remembering it, and also not being locked in to this current state of reality, which we've been sold as kind of just how things are.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to unpack there. We'll definitely do another show on that. But just kind of, we're getting close to the time, maybe 5-10 minutes. It's been a really good chat, guys. I think one point around like how information is stored and how we access that. So if you're trying to understand what really happened back then, right, you can dig up stuff, you can look at historical records. A lot of that stuff's just altered and suppressed. But I think this information is also stored potentially in energy and fields. And, you can look at sunlight holds information, and that encodes stuff when it hits your body. It probably definitely is, like Dan was saying, it's like biological cryptography going on. There's all kinds of information exchange going on. If you're connected to it, you have a much higher chance of being able to listen and perceive what's going on. If you're not, then you just don't even have that signal coming to you, and you're being bombarded with all kinds of other information or incoherent light. So I think that's a big part of like understanding where we come from, is like getting back in our natural environment and getting skin in the game. And DNA is very much like an antenna. It kind of picks up information, it then acts on that light, on that signal, and it does certain things. It encodes proteins a certain way. It starts to run the body. So our very physiology to feel at ease and then to potentially evolve is driven by these processes. And I think there is information, even going back to like what Rupert Sheldrake talks about with like morphic fields and energetic fields. There's like a shared history or a shared story, and that information could well be encoded in our environment, in our natural environment, and we're just not getting access to it when we're disconnected. So I think having your DNA being more activated or being more sensitive through things like sunlight and natural exposure could potentially make that remembering process easier, of like, where do we come from, what was our journey, where did our ancestors go through.
And that's not even woo-woo. That's so fine. That's not even woo-woo. That's like just putting yourself in the predicament, the situation that your ancestors would have been in. They'd have been outside a whole lot more than we are now. So it is like anything. Yeah, that makes complete sense.
Yeah, our physiology has evolved around light and being in nature. The part about the morphic fields and resonance, that's probably a little bit more speculative in terms of science can't explain it, but it makes a lot of sense when you actually spend time in nature, or you take plant medicines and you're tapping into these worlds and dimensions and stories that are hidden there that are just not accessible to most people. They just look at it like it's a mushroom, it's a plant. But why are these things illegal? Why are these experiences illegal? Because you're remembering, you're tapping into something that shows you how much power we actually have in our being. And those experiences, those states, I don't think there's a lot of interest in keeping those states hidden from people and disconnect from people. That's where a lot of our power is. So again, you go back to Egypt, and a lot of why history is suppressed is to do with a lot of power that was there. The Egyptians worshipped the sun. They were crazy about the sun. They were as addicted to the sun as anyone, and they were some of the smartest people in our history as we can come up with. So you look at what they were doing, how they found such greatness, how they built such smart civilizations, and how all degraded, and then obviously that knowledge was lost. We can pick up some of the same tools today and tap into that knowledge that they were tapping into, just by understanding what they were doing. And I think we can remember a lot of that information. There's one final point, and I'll open up to any other questions. But if you look at what's happening right now with the Earth, like the Earth is very much, you can consider it like an entity that's going through its own evolution, just like our solar system, just like our sun. The sun is the nearest star to us. So when you look at like its influence, obviously it gives light, it gives life to everything on Earth, and it's driving a lot of these forces, and it's probably the nearest God that we can see and perceive on a daily basis, right? And it's just another star. So it's, again, relaying information from the cosmos, hits the sun and gets reflected off it, and it relays the information to us. So we're getting hit all the time with this radiation, with this like cosmic force, and it's got information encoded into it, and it's being passed into us, and it's hitting the Earth. And it's also happening at a time when the Earth's magnetic field is getting weaker and weaker. And what the Earth's magnetic field does is actually reflect a lot of this radiation. So it's protecting the Earth like in a bubble. And when that magnetic field gets weaker, as it's been happening for the last 20 or 30 years, and again, no one's talking about this because they're not talking about a lot of interesting stuff. But when the magnetic field gets weaker, what it means is a lot more of the cosmic radiation from the sun can hit the Earth. It means more information is hitting the Earth at this time than ever before. And it's actually a rate of evolution is happening. The pace of change is happening now. And people are more disconnected than ever because they've been kept indoors, because they've been kept denatured, because they're going to burn because this information, this radiation is just too strong for people. But actually, it's like the evolution is happening at a solar level. Our universe, our galaxy, this solar system, the way the sun's Earth radiation is hitting the Earth, and and more of it's getting through because the magnetic field is weakening. Like all of these things are part of evolution, part of the energy and information exchange that we can tap into to find answers. So just looking beyond like the textbooks is probably the first step.
Yeah, I just want to say.
Oh, sorry, carry on, Emma.
Oh, thanks. I just want to say that I definitely believe that some of the stuff we're able to touch upon when we have as much light as possible flowing through us, which means as much energy as possible flow through us, that we can do what all these ancient people also did. They move stuff with our minds, levitate, all these things that's in the hidden history books of meditation and yogis and all these things. I think it's 100% possible. I think what they experienced in those times was that they would harness the energies of the universe, whether it was the sun, the stars, and the moon, all these things. When you bring them into alignment and start harnessing it, using it in your body, you can live basically forever. You can not eat if you want to, you can not drink if you want to, and then you can just use all that energy to create whatever you want. If you want to create beautiful pyramid structures, or Chichen Itza where you worship the sun, and in the cycles that it has, a lot of these stuff, I'm sure it was just because they wanted to show their creative power. So it kind of became like just a show, or just an expression of creativity and expression of energy. So the one who would be able to harness the most energy could create the most beautiful, biggest structure. So I'm not even sure they needed 80 people to do that. Maybe they just needed one. If he was powerful enough, or if that person was powerful enough, whether he was 1,000 years old, harnessed energy for 1,000 years in the desert, I don't know. But there's definitely so many possibilities. And when you start to touch upon that power, you can really feel that even just by having a fraction of that into your body, you can feel like, wow, this is more or less limitless, because it's absolutely magical. So
I just want to state for the record that I don't know about these things, and I'm not going along with them as long as I'm not also sort of learning them by myself. And I think that's something that we can all take for ourselves as we move forward, like to keep that conversation alive between sort of the empirical process of science and like vetting things and doing due diligence on them, and sort of not letting that curtail our curiosity in staying open to things that don't fit the current consensus reality. And so I think that's one of the things that we need to keep in mind, that we can get excited a lot about like all kinds of possibilities, and probably they can be true and real, but also to keep in mind, okay, now we actually also have to check again and not get led astray, because that's often what happens to sort of super charismatic and super powerful people who are always in the sun, who are always doing these sort of things that increase their personal agency. At some point they have the possibility to either be misunderstood by their followers and sort of really thought to have magical supernatural qualities that go beyond what is actually possible in the universe, and then sort of get elevated to the status of a god, and then bad things can happen from there, or they themselves lose touch with reality because they're just so ungrounded in terms of what their actions have an effect not only on the physical world but also on the social world, and then they sort of go astray. So that's like it's always this negotiation between staying open and channeling it properly, in a sense.
Yeah, there's a good phrase. I can't remember the guy that says it, but there's those phases where you think, first of all, things are happening to me. It's like the blame victimhood thing, and then you think it's by me because you think I'm doing everything, and I'm the ego kind of takes credit for it and says it's me, and then it's through me because you realize these things are all just happening through us. None of us is any more special than the other one. We're all just tapping into forces much bigger than ourselves, the small, us. And so these things are happening through us, and direct experience is so powerful. So you got to like sidestep sometimes the ration that says you can't do something when it comes to like what's proven with science and the faith and the belief that's required to move beyond that sometimes. But also, don't expect anyone to worship you. Don't get stuck up on yourself. Just like go with what's working for you, and share that if you're comfortable to, if you don't mind being ridiculed or whatever. And that's kind of what this show is really for, is like people sharing as brutally and honestly as they can. And for other people that's just outside their belief system, that's fine, right? They haven't experienced that. That's cool. We're not going to tell that person you're delusional or you're crazy or something.
Right.
So.
And I think that I'm not saying that to say like I don't think it's possible. I'm saying that to say that it's absolutely crucial for everybody to not accept ideas without doing their own research and doing their own like understanding of those ideas, because otherwise you don't really own those ideas. You don't really understand those ideas, and they're sort of just representations that don't have a referent. I'm also bringing it up because I was listening recently to another podcast called Emerge, and there was Vinay Gupta, like a crypto and sort of humanitarian kind of, and also a guy who claims to be enlightened and who has done like years and years of meditation. And he was talking about the monster factory, like our world being this monster factory of just churning out psychopaths and doing all kinds of bad things, and people who are more sort of aware and awakened are interested in sort of doing the right thing and saving the world and that kind of stuff. They need to be very careful to when they are first waking up and sort of following this call to do all these interesting things, to have people that can help them navigate the treacherous waters where you can sort of go too deep too quickly and not come up for air. And so there's always use in having a social context in which you can engage with these kind of things, not only to go everything by yourself and then like run into traps that other people have already figured out and could tell you about and help you work through.
Yeah, for sure.
You
It's
can
super useful
actually
to have a
break.
group. Yeah, it's super useful to have a group or a network of people you trust and can go through this stuff and discuss it. As far as Vinny Gupta, I've heard different stories about him. I'm not going to share on this, but yeah, that's a different story.
I've met him as well, actually, in Gibraltar, a crypto conference there. He's quite a character. He's great. He's quite a character. Oh yeah, but yeah, there's a few stories that he told me that were quite interesting. One odd thing I just wanted to quickly say before I duck out: truth is very much, there are whole truths, but truth is very much down to someone's experience, and truth is only true to some person at a particular point in time. And that's all I want to say. And you're probably going to discuss this now, and I've got to go. But thanks, guys, and I'll check in, see what I missed later on today.
Nice, thanks. See you later.
See you later.
Everybody.
Bye.
Yeah, maybe truth is another topic we can do for a show like that. That'll be fun.
Definitely. Lynn's still on mute.
Universal truth.
Yeah, I have to keep notes. No, it's cool. No, it's definitely really cool. But no, I think that's probably can wrap it up here if you want, boys. I mean, I do feel that it's actually has been of real use, but always is anyway. Not that's necessarily a goal, but it's helped just because it is genuine. It's a genuine query I've had for years, and not that this necessarily answered it like that, but it's helped, anecdotal experiences as well, from people you trust, and it's handy. So basically, put myself in a position to be able to receive this wisdom to then go and do what I've got to do. But I mean, I'm not too, I'm going to go play my PlayStation now. Forget all about this conversation. But but no, it's a really, really good talk, guys. Obviously, I'm looking forward to. It's nice we've managed to spawn 3 other ones from here anyway, as well as what's already people had on their lists. That's awesome as well. A nice structure, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing you just said was funny, which I said to Emil as well, which is like it's always a process of forgetting and remembering, and we kind of do that every day with what we are paying attention to. But in whether it was this life or the past life or history, and then today and present day, there's just a constant process of forgetting and remembering. So it's not like you're gonna always get straight to the answer and then hold that truth forever. Like what you put yourself through is like either pushing you towards remembering or forgetting, and I think that's just a cycle. It's just like anything else. Cataclysms come, wipe out humans, maybe we do it all again for another 12,000 years. And so that forgetting and remembering is built into our daily process as well. It's that part of that breathing rhythm that Nick was talking about.
Yeah, and just we can talk about this on another podcast as well, and Moritz touched on it, but I've really gone deep into the integration process, and that's kind of like what you guys are talking about with like the forgetting and remembering, and what Moritz is talking about with like grounding in the knowledge and finding out what's truth for you through direct experience, and really keeping a sharp sense of discernment. And like a lot of that is through like deep integration and kind of, and that's a whole another topic in itself. And that's something that can get lost in translation and lost in the plant medicine, shamanic world and vision quest world and all of that. And, like the integration is as important or more important. And it's kind of, like I had a weekly mentor that I spent like years working with after like deep work with plant medicine and shamanic work and all that kind of thing. And it's kind of like a constant ongoing thing of like integrating some of these experiences and grounding and there's a everything we're talking about, like with nature and movement and all and all that kind of thing. I've been doing a lot of natural movement stuff as well, like learning how to move my body naturally in nature and like through different movements and martial arts and all that kind of thing. But like all of it is based around this kind of integration part, and that's kind of what I was touching on before with talking things through, and not to get caught up in the psychological, but part of that is just part of the integration process, so we can really ground into this, like into our full being of like what's really true for us and what is our direct experience, and how do we hold that knowledge and move forward with that in a more congruent way with our beingness.
Awesome. Yeah, let's definitely do a show on that, Nick. That can be your next one.
Definitely.
Cool.
Nice one, guys.
All right, Lynn, you want to wrap it up?
Yep. So, more of a story. Don't eat yellow snow. No. It's been great, really great talk. I'm looking forward to future ones coming up as well. Hope you guys got something from it as well as giving to it. And I look forward to talking to you all soon. Have a nice one. I'll see you later on.
Awesome. All right, guys. Catch you next week.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
See you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Peace
Ciao.
out.